What if your favorite snacks were quietly destroying your sleep hours after you've actually fallen asleep, or making it a lot harder to fall asleep? Ultra processed foods don't just mess with your metabolism, they rewire your hormones, your gut, and even to an extent your dreams. Studies now show that people who eat the most processed foods are 50% more likely to have insomnia, even when you control for stress and exercise and caffeine intake. Now, this isn't, again, related to willpower or late night scrolling. It's about how food companies engineered your cravings and in the process hijacked your rest and ability to sleep as well. So in this video, I break down exactly how that happens and how to reverse it as well, starting tonight. So let's start off by defining the enemy. Ultra processed foods, or is there a way that I can shorten this? UPIFs? UPIFs, let's say UPIFs. They aren't just junk food, they are industrial formulations that you couldn't make in your own kitchen, even if you tried, or at least I'd be highly impressed if you managed to do that. These are products that are built from things like refined starches, industrial oils, seed oils, flavor enhancers, emulsifiers, gums, stabilizers, and colorants, for example. Now, the NOVA classification system, which is a tool used in nutrition science, actually splits foods into 4 levels of processing. So group 1 is whole foods like apples and eggs and oats and things like that, whereas group 4 is where the ultra processed foods fall under. And these are mixtures of industrial ingredients and additives rather than actual real whole food. So some examples of these are things like sugary cereals and frozen dinners and plant-based meats, packaged protein bars, for example, flavored yogurts, honestly, a whole lot of snack foods, most snack foods nowadays, and even a lot of healthy diet products that look innocent on the label or claim to be gut promoting or gut healthy. Now, quick clarification, because I know someone is likely going to say this in the comments, but not all processed foods are necessarily bad. There is a huge difference between processing and ultra processing of foods. So processing can mean something simple. It could be grinding or fermenting or extracting, like turning milk into yogurt. Those are still foods that come from natural origins. Whereas ultra processing is when that raw material is so broken down and then rebuilt with things like additives and colorants and emulsifiers and artificial sweeteners that it barely resembles where it came from. So if your supplement or protein powder lists recognizable ingredients and is third-party tested and all of those good things, and doesn't hide behind, gums or chemical flavors or a ton of ingredients you don't understand, then that's not what we're talking about here. That's what I would call functional processing. The real problem starts when those industrial shortcuts begin hijacking your body's natural chemistry. And that is what we're digging into today, how those ultra processed formulations can quietly disrupt one of your body's most essential healing systems, and that is sleep. And I'm sure we all know how important sleep is, well, at least I hope you do by now, so if you're listening to this. So we're not going to go into the details of why sleep is important, but we are going to go into the details of how this happens and what to do about it too if you're struggling with sleep, and you may not have realized that a lot of these things actually impact that. So let's break down what is actually happening in your body when you eat this stuff, and especially later in the day. So first up on the list is your blood sugar and how they interact. So ultra processed foods, they are basically designed to digest really fast, and that's part of the main problem, is that you get these quick glucose spikes following eating these foods, unless they're obviously artificial sweeteners that works in a slightly different way, but in the high sugar foods, followed by that crash. And that crash doesn't just make you tired, it actually activates your adrenals as well. So when blood sugar drops, your body releases cortisol, which is your main stress hormone. It releases cortisol to bring glucose back up. And that is basically just a survival mechanisms that our body has. But the problem is that cortisol follows a daily rhythm, and it's meant to be higher in the morning to wake you up and lower at night so that melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, can start to rise. So if you're eating ultra processed foods for dinner, or you're grabbing a sweet snack before bed, then you're going to be confusing your body's clock. You're essentially telling your brain, hey, it's morning again, by doing that. And that is why so many people lie there wired in bed, even though they are exhausted and they know they're really tired, they need the sleep, but they just feel wired. It's because their circadian rhythm is completely out of sync. And that is actually something I struggled with for a while too, is, always feeling like I need that sweet hit after having dinner. and choosing options that were ultra processed. It's something I had to work really hard to change as well, because when you get stuck on that, it's very hard to stop and break that pattern, which means, it's almost easier just not having these things around. So then there's the side of inflammation, which is another huge one as well. So most of these ultra processed foods, or these UPFs, they use cheap industrial oils that can oxidize really easy. And in doing so, they generate free radicals, which your body basically reads as tiny chemical stress signals. So over time, that low-grade inflammation affects the nervous system and blood vessels, and even the blood-brain barrier, all of which are critical for deep sleep. See, your deepest sleep stages, the ones where your body actually repairs tissues and balances hormones and clears toxins from the brain, they happen when inflammation is low. But if your system's constantly fighting off oxidative stress and inflammatory compounds, it's like your body's trying to do these repairs during a thunderstorm. You might get some rest, but your body never fully switches into that deep repair mode. Okay, so that's all bad enough in itself, but there's also the talk about the gut-brain connection, right? Because around 90% of your serotonin, which later turns into melatonin, right, which is really important for sleep, that serotonin is made in the gut. But ultra-processed foods can disrupt that entire network. Additives like emulsifiers and gums and artificial sweeteners can change the composition of your microbiome, making your gut lining more permeable. And that's often what people refer to as leaky gut, which in itself can have a whole bunch of negative side effects on your health. Now, that not only affects serotonin and melatonin production, but it also sends constant low-level stress signals to your brain through the vagus nerve. So when your gut's inflamed or it's out of balance, your brain stays alert like it's on watch duty instead of winding down and getting ready to sleep and repair. Now, you also might be wondering, what about the healthier processed stuff, like those natural sugar-free lollies made with stevia or erythritol? Are those just as bad? And it really depends there's no blanket rule for all of them, but some sugar alcohols like erythritol and maltitol can trigger bloating in some and gut irritation and mild blood sugar responses in others, even though they're marketed as sugar-free, and they could potentially long-term affect your insulin levels too. Stevia, on the other hand, usually it's better tolerated, but if that product also contains things like gums and colorants and artificial flavorings and things, then your gut is still going to be getting that same inflammatory hit. So it really just depends on, everything that's in it. It's less about whether it says sugar-free or natural and more about how many ingredients it takes to make it taste that way. All right, now the last part that I want to mention in this section is a thing that most people often overlook, and that's nutrient depletion. At least they overlook it when in relation to sleep. So ultra-processed diets are typically low in the exact nutrients that your brain and your nervous system need to switch off. So magnesium, for example, which helps calm the nervous system and support GABA, which is your body's main relaxation neurotransmitter. Things like tryptophan, which is found in foods like turkey and pumpkin seeds and oats, for example. That is the building block for serotonin and melatonin. Then you have B vitamins, which are essential for energy and metabolism and neurotransmitter balance, and also fiber, which is what keeps your gut bacteria happy and helps regulate the release of sleep-related compounds overnight. So when those nutrients are stripped away, your body is basically trying to sleep without the raw materials that it actually needs to relax and get into that state. So you put all of that together, you've got blood sugar spikes, cortisol misfires, inflammation, gut imbalance, missing nutrients, and your body is getting hit from every direction. The result of that can be things like light or restless sleep or constant waking and that groggy, unrefreshed feeling in the morning. So even if you technically got 8 hours, you may not feel that way, or you may not have gotten 8 hours of the right types of sleep, right? Because you have different cycles within your sleep that your body needs to go through. So to me, it's no wonder and it's no surprise that there are so many people out there that struggle with sleep. And it's kind of funny because I feel like the specific foods that you eat are one of the last things, if at all, to be, associated with negative sleep. Like we go through all of the other things like, your breathing at nighttime, which yes, these are all important too, but screen time, the environment you're in, is it cool enough? Is it dark enough? Caffeine, stimulants, alcohol, things like that. but rarely do we look at the types of foods that we're eating and the timing of that and how these all play a role in that as well, which is kind of mind-baffling too when you think about just the extent at which these could potentially affecting your sleep. But all of this too, all the physiology that I just went through, it does actually have some research and science to back it as well, slowly but surely catching up. So let's go through some of that, because I always like to share that where I can as well. So a meta-analysis, basically just pulling the data from multiple different studies, found that high ultra-processed food intake is associated with a 53% higher chance or higher odds of insomnia, which is bloody insane. That's such a high amount. And then in a large French cohort, adults whose energy intake from these ultra-processed foods was higher had more symptoms of chronic insomnia independent of lifestyle and mental health or overall diet quality. Now, another observational study showed that higher ultra-processed food intake correlated with shorter sleep duration and poorer sleep quality, even when adjusting for age and other key factors as well. Now, these are a lot of the ones that I just mentioned, they are cross-sectional studies, so just essentially snapshots in time. So we can't prove direct cause and effect yet just from those. We'd want more. But when the biological mechanisms and the population data start saying the same thing, that is the pattern, or a pattern, that you can't ignore. At least I won't ignore that. So I even used to see it in a lot of my clients when I was practicing as well. Once they shifted mostly to whole foods or significantly reduced their ultra-processed food intake, many of them actually started falling asleep a lot easier or faster and staying asleep longer and actually waking up feeling refreshed, which I feel like in this day and age is such a rarity. And the data is slowly catching up with what real people have actually been noticing for years. So yeah, the evidence is piling up and it's painting a pretty clear picture, at least in my eyes, that ultra-processed foods, they don't just mess with your waistline, among other things, your sanity as well. They disrupt your body on a level that reaches all the way into your sleep cycles. But there is good news, or here's the good news. Your body is incredibly adaptive, and the moment that you start removing the triggers and giving it the right inputs, essentially, it knows exactly what to do. So let's actually talk about that, what you can actually do to start getting your deep, uninterrupted sleep back. If it's something that you're currently struggling with, despite maybe trying a lot of the typical, most common things people suggest. So first of all, evening cutoff window and or time buffer. So you want to avoid ultra-processed foods at least 3 to 4 hours before bed. Let your insulin levels and your digestion and your cortisol settle before going to sleep. Number 2, swap them for whole alternatives instead of, having the packaged snack bar. Try a small handful of nuts and a piece of fruit, or, mini oat-based snacks with real ingredients, or use snacks with protein. So you could have some Greek yogurt with some seeds, a little bit of fruit. You don't want too much fruit, but some fruit on top. Or it could be something random like a small turkey roll with spinach, or just something that has nutritional benefit. It's not going to spike your blood sugar too much, and you still want to make sure that you're having it ideally, 2 hours before you go to sleep, so your body's not trying to digest when you do go to sleep. But for the ultra-processed foods, again, I would encourage you to not have them at night, but if you had to, 3 to 4 hours minimum before bed. Number 3, improve your nutrient status. So add in magnesium-rich foods, things like leafy greens and nuts and seeds into your diet. Tryptophan sources, so turkey, pumpkin seeds, things like that, and fiber. So think vegetables and legumes and diversity within that as well. And then number 4, stabilize your blood sugars throughout the day. So keep your meals balanced. Have a good mixture of protein and fat and fiber, so your baseline is actually stable. And then you're going to be less tempted to actually snack on junk food later on in the evening. If you're eating balanced meals earlier in the day, less likely to snack on that ultra-processed foods in the evening. And then number 5, mind your additives and packaging. Don't get fooled by the packaging. Go for items or packaged things that have minimal ingredients and simple ingredient foods. Avoid known sleep disrupting additives, so some artificial sweeteners and flavor enhancers where possible. And then 6, reset your sleep environment and rituals around that. So combine the food changes with good sleep hygiene, like those things that you probably already know. The dark room, the consistent times, no screens before bed, things like that. If you were doing all these things, that may not necessarily change your sleep overnight, but over weeks, many people do notice fewer awakenings, deeper rest, and less grogginess. But you do have to be consistent with it. You can't do it for a couple nights and expect it to make a world of difference, because your gut as well needs time to change and to heal if you've been eating a lot of the ultra processed foods for a really long time. Now, it is also important to note that, there are individual differences, genetics, stress levels, underlying conditions as well, that also modulate how strongly someone reacts to making these changes and your ability to sleep. So if you do have diagnosed sleep disorders like sleep apnea, for example, or restless leg, nutritional shifts are still probably going to be helpful, but they may not be a standalone fix. And if you're changing anything major, as always, please consult with your healthcare professionals first. So use this knowledge as a lever, not as guilt. Just by replacing and upgrading your food environment, it gives your body a better chance to heal and to work how it should be able to work, which means good sleep and waking up, feeling energized and refreshed. So next time that you reach for that late night snack, just remember that it's not just about calories. Ultra processed foods might be silently sabotaging your sleep and messing with your chemistry and your gut and your hormones and basically everything, and leaving you restless in the dark. All right, as always, if you have any questions, comment them below, and please go ahead and give it a like, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with people that you think might find some value from it. If you have friends and family that really struggle with sleep, please send it their way, because they could really benefit from this. All right, I will see you in the next video.